Hey guys, so I watched this movie over the weekend called See You Soon. And man, this was a fun movie. So I wanted to come and talk to you guys about this movie. Before I start though, I do want to give a special mention to Abhishek because mate, you have recommended this movie to me about 3 times and I'm so glad that you did because it was such a joy to watch. And apologies if it took a while, but thank you again so much for recommending me this movie because yeah, it was so much fun. Now, the first thing that strikes you in this movie is obviously the style of the movie, right? This movie is not your traditional movie. Of course, we're seeing a movie that's completely shot in the digital world. Like this movie is completely screen sharing, iPhones, iMac, Google Duo, everything you can think of, WhatsApp, all the technology that we have right now to basically use in our daily lives. And it's shot completely in that. I don't think there's any handheld camera or any, studio camera used in this movie at all. Now that does a few things. It really opens up a few different opportunities because it just I think it challenges writers, directors, everyone involved with the creation of this movie to just think differently and play to the strengths of this format. And I think this movie does that really well because what we see, and we see it from the very start of the movie, how sort of impactful the digital age is on our lives. Like when I was watching this movie and I think about the relationships I have with most people in my life, most of my interactions are with people digitally. Like, I work from home a lot of the time. So my work is basically from a digital means. Most of my relationships with my friends most of our interactions are digital. This podcast you listen to is completely digital, It's so much of our world right now. So it makes sense for this movie to just feel so close and so intimate to us in so many different ways. And that level of realism and authenticity is illustrated so well in sort of the first 20 minutes when they're building out this relationship between Anu and Jimmy, played by Roshan, Mathew, and Darshana. So yeah, we get to see a whole relationship basically blossom from start to finish. And the interactions which are very much like the interaction that most of us have probably had with our loved ones, either during or, before we got serious or whatever stage we're at, it's just so real as to how things happen. A lot of voice notes, a lot of messaging, a lot of selfies. These are stuff you don't normally see in traditional movies, right? You don't get to see that side of things as much because obviously it's not the focus. But when you're in this medium, you get to take advantage and show the intricacies and intimacies that we have as humans with people using technology. So I think it shows that side really well. It shows the power of technology, both the positives and negatives really, really well. So I want to talk about that a little bit before I start talking about the movie. But I've already talked about the positives. On the negative sides, we also get to see, how it can make us vulnerable. Identity theft or stealing someone's identity or not knowing anything about somebody, despite the fact that all information is out there. We get stuck in this puzzle that basically Anu and Jimmy are in. Like, even though Anu Mole is on the internet, I guess, she's in a scenario where she's trapped and her identity has gone somewhere else. And that whole exploration as to find out who she is really interesting. But it does show you the dangers of kind of technology and sort of, how it sort of takes us away from reality sometimes as well. So again, it plays on both sides really well throughout this movie. And it's hard to talk about this movie without talking about the medium so much because it's just so different in all ways, And I'll touch on that throughout this movie. But if I get onto the movie a little bit more, I will talk about sort of the storytelling. Because again, with the medium that we have, what it does is it prevents you from doing the things that you might, as a director or as a writer, lean on. We don't get any songs. We don't get any montages. We don't get any action sequences. We don't really get any flashbacks or anything like that. The flashbacks we get are done through like photographs and voice notes. They're not complete scenes. And of course, maybe that's the way that it is because of this format, but it feels like the flashbacks are so sharp and short that they don't really take you out of the movie as much. Like, obviously, I know the power of montages and flashbacks, and I've seen them done so well in Malayalam movies, but in general, in all movies, there's always a risk of doing that because you always start to the pacing just starts to fall apart at times. Because when you're going on one path, you take us back a few steps and then bring us back later. Or you suppress everything in a montage, which sometimes is done really well, but it's just, it takes you out of the linear flow of a movie. This movie, because everything is real time, it's just one steady flow. So the pacing of this movie is really good. I actually really enjoyed this movie just from an entertainment piece because you could just sit back and relax and just be engaged the whole time. One, you're pretty, you're interested because of the format it's taking and the different technologies they're using to find, different people and basically showcase different events. It's done so well, but on another side, you're engaged because it's just so fast paced. Everything just keeps going on and on without too much drag at all. So it's really fantastic. I really enjoy the storytelling aspect of this movie, to be honest. Again, it blends a lot of sort of genres once again. There's a bit of genre blending here with sort of the drama as well as a mystery and thriller. It explores sort of human connection and the complexities that it has in our digital world now as to, how we actually get to know each other. Is it a positive? Is it a negative? It sort of plays on these questions a little bit, especially through the relationship with Jimmy and Anumol. But on the positive side, I will say I really did appreciate the fact that this movie puts you in the mind of somebody that's probably working in sort of the cyber world and how much they can do despite not being physically close to anyone, right? We see Kevin, played by Fahadh Faasil. He's basically the inspector in this movie and he detects everything. He's basically the cop in this entire movie and he's able to do everything despite never being in person, never leaving his room. And we get to see the emotions he also has to go through with that, like the trauma when he's going through the files and learning more about Anumol and her tragic story. We get to see how it's impacting him turn by turn by turn and how his expressions are changing little by little by little. The relationship between Kevin and Jimmy, that's also fascinating to me because it's so well done, again, in this medium to phone calls. And there are a lot of relationships that do just break apart online, we get that a lot in our current world. So, yeah, look, I just thought that, there was a lot to sort of like about this movie in terms of the structure, its narration, its performances. I'll touch on performances a little bit later, but I will also talk a little bit just about sort of this general story and sort of how dark it sort of gets. Because, man, this movie really gets dark. I mean, overall, it's a pretty dark movie from almost after the first maybe half an hour. And again, this is a shorter movie because it's so well paced. It feels like so much has happened in that short span of time. But yeah, it gets really dark, man. Like it's kind of unsettling to see this movie and where it sort of takes us because it takes us to some pretty dark places. And one thing I commend this movie for is unlike movies that I've seen, which have a similar kind of approach, like this whole digital kind of movie, there are a few other movies I've seen that are like this, but they have not really taken us to anything like in real life. Like, like this movie looks like it's at least based on a real life scenario or a real life social issue. And that's basically the trafficking of, these poor women in Kerala, these poor women in India in general to Dubai under the false illusion that they're going to have a better life there and then to be basically prostituted. It's such a scary premise to think of, and you just see how vulnerable some of these people are and how easy they can be exploited. Again, through a lot of just digital means, right? Like we can feel how trapped they are, how trapped Anumol is basically in this world that she's in now, and she can't get out. And it's horrific. But what makes it even more horrific is the fact that it's real. Like this has actually happened. So I did really sort of, when it got to the second half in the last maybe 15, 20 minutes, it really started to get unsettling, but it was just so well done. The other part that I really enjoyed was, again, obviously the mystery element of this movie. Because this movie, there's so much mystery because when you're in the screen, you're not exposed to everything. You're only exposed to whatever you can see. So it feels like your scope and view of the world is just so small But what they do, they use that to their advantage once again, because the things you don't see are the parts that sort of help us to sort of keep us guessing. Like throughout this entire movie, I didn't know what was actually going on or who was a culprit for what until certain points. In fact, I even suspected Jimmy was somehow involved with this whole scenario. Even at times, I thought his mum was involved because I thought there must be somebody from that side who sends people from India potentially to Dubai, and they were the link up. So it was pretty. It just kept you guessing the whole time. And again, just as an entertainment piece, fantastic. The movie was really, really done. I enjoyed it thoroughly throughout the entire story. And probably the second half, when Fahadh Faasil is just sort of finding out what's happening piece by piece by piece, it's such a fun watch. I just was so gripped to the screen. I will say a few things. This movie is a great movie to watch at home because I definitely found myself like rewinding at times to basically find out what happened. It's a great movie to watch with company, I'd say, because I watched it with my wife and we were just discussing it back and forth and trying to solve out what was happening. It was really fantastic to just have that interaction and engagement to try and find out, what is actually happening here and what's going on. How dark is this going to get? The whole part about the identity theft and how they're just discovering that she is not the person who they say she is. But again, like, was she that person or not? There were so many questions I kept asking throughout the movie. So again, such an entertaining movie, such a fun movie to watch. I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It was it was a really good one. But yeah, I didn't have too much more to say about the movie, to be honest. I did seriously enjoy it. I liked it quite a bit. It had good social commentary on top of a good narrative and a good storyline. I will give some special mentions about performances because again, they're still acting, it's still performance, but just the camera lens is just your iPhone. It's, that's mostly the times we saw it, or the webcam or something like that. That's how we saw most of the view in this world. And the actors, they have to sort of act accordingly to that. I think my favorite performance was probably from Darshana, Rajendran. Now, I'm not sure if she's a big actress or not, but man, she was really fantastic in this movie. Like, wow. I think she probably had the most impactful performances. And again, her character had the most scope, I think. Like, her character had the traumatic storyline. She had a journey from Kerala to Dubai to being trapped to then escaping. So her character actually went places, whereas the others didn't have so much. But man, some of the scenes that she had when she's breaking down in tears and struggling, and when she's being abused, she's really, playing this really well because there's a whole lot of mystery as to who is this woman. At times I thought, is she just a call girl? But then we find out she's not a call girl. She's a call girl who's been forced into that by basically kidnapping. So her performance was fantastic. I thought she was great. Obviously, Fahadh Faasil was really good in this as well. I thought he was just, some of the scenes that he had when he's showing emotion just on the webcam, I really enjoyed his performance towards the second half when he's just slowly dissecting this case and you just see him slowly break down. And when it really gets serious for him, there's a moment when it hits and he just has to just get away and he's just devastated. And it's just done like this through the webcam. That is such a powerful performance. He can do that in such a limited screen. It was pretty well done. I really enjoyed his performance in this. And again, something different. He's really turning into one of my favorite actors, to be honest. Whatever he does, I'm just, always impressed by him. So another great performance to add to his sort of list of great movies so far. Other one, Roshan Mathew, I think was also very solid. But I think the other two were probably standouts for me. I will touch on quickly now before I wrap up other movies in this similar kind of format to this. Now, I've seen a couple movies that have done the same technique. The one that comes to mind straight away is the movie Searching from 2018, I believe it is. That is very, very similar to this in terms of its conventions and its filmmaking style. In fact, I'd be surprised if this movie didn't take some of the cues from that movie. I mean, you can't really do so much more creatively, to be honest, than what this movie has done. They kind of showed us different forms of technology and different forms of sort of messaging, different forms of calling, audio notes versus video calls versus text messages versus Facebook versus whatever else they used, databases that they used to find out places for information. They gave the whole gamut, and Searching did the same thing. The thing that I think makes this movie a little bit different is the fact that this is actually based on something real, which kind of makes it even darker. Like, I think Searching was a great entertainment piece, but at the end of the day, it was a fictional homicide. Also great mystery and, great performances in that movie as well. But this movie, I think, because of that extra layer, makes it a bit more impactful. I think it told me something which I didn't know was even a thing really in India. So kudos to this movie for being bold and showing us something like that, even though it might have been controversial. I don't know how it was in India, if this was a controversial topic or not. But look, I just appreciate the movie for actually being bold and telling us this. The other movie that I think it reminds me of is a movie which I think is maybe my favorite of all these genres, is a movie called Unfriended, which again takes the same kind of tropes, the whole digital world, but this is a time before the iPhone. So I think it's before iPhone because the whole movie is just shot on Skype. It's just one big screen and it's just Skype. 5 people are on the screen and they're just talking throughout the movie. And what makes that movie really interesting is that it's a horror. So, I think thrillers are still okay because they're mystery, but doing a horror without any gore, without any, big reveals, no big scary mask, it's a completely different challenge to itself. So if you like this kind of movie, I'd really recommend the movie Unfriended. It's an old movie. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube or a streaming service somewhere pretty close by. But look, that'll do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you are new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button. It helps our channel grow, and we're really looking to grow so much more this year. And again, special mention, thank you to you, Abhishek. I'm so glad I covered this movie. If you have any recommendations, drop in the comments, because at this stage, we are at the point where we need more recommendations because we are doing so many movies that I'm starting to churn through them pretty fast. So any recommendation is always great. But yeah, look, I really enjoyed talking to you guys on this. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you on the next one.